Brenda Mamer. She's excused. Tom Muller.
Here.
Jeff Peterson.
Here.
Louise Schutz.
Here.
Lynn Zentner.
Here.
Matt Lemon.
Here.
Thank you. Would you all please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At the conclusion of the open session, the board may adjourn into executive closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statutes 19.85, paren 1C and E, for the purpose of considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any staff, and for the purpose of deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. More specifically, this evening we will be considering master agreement contract negotiation issues and considering administrative contract issues. The board may reconvene into open session pursuant to Wisconsin Statutes 19.85, paren 2, if necessary, to act on considerations given during the executive session. There's a couple chairs up front if you want to come in and sit down. And there's agendas in the box. If anybody doesn't have one, please feel free in the corner of the table there to pick one up. The first item on the agenda this evening is public comments and agenda requests. This is the time when you can address the board if you have comments to make, agenda requests, or you wish to request floor privileges on any action on the agenda this evening. Is there anyone that wishes to address the board?
Yes, I'd like to request floor privileges under item 8A, old business, consider student foreign travel.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Jean.
Gentleman at the door.
Sorry.
I would like to request floor privileges for item H.
H.
That's budget reduction review.
Okay, could I have your name, please?
Matt Leader.
Thank you, Matt.
And James Koppelman, please.
Okay. Anyone else? Jan?
Can I make a comment now?
You certainly can.
Just a slight correction about something that was said at the last board meeting. A comment was made that the middle school only has one set of parent teachers, and we don't. We have two.
Okay. Thank you, Jan. Anyone else? Seeing none, then I will ask for a motion to grant floor privileges to Gina Noko under old business item A, and Matt Leader and James Koppelman under business and action items H. Do I have such a motion? Ron?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Louise? Second it. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, nay? Anyone abstaining? Okay, thank you very much. Ron?
Just one quick comment. I don't know if you're ready to get into the special student presentations, but I've always been very proud of students in schools that do patriotic things, and this is kind of a tough situation for all our country, and we probably all know individuals that are involved in this war that's going on now. But I received some kudos, and I believe they're the Jefferson students that were pictured in the photo news a couple weeks back already, but people outside of our community get that paper, and they thought it was just wonderful that the whole school, all those students did that. And so I just thought I'd say thank you to Jefferson staff for that opportunity of their students.
Great. Thank you, Ron. Jeff?
I think I see two of the board candidates in attendance tonight, so I would like to move that we grant board privileges to them to speak on any issues.
Thank you. Do I have a second to that motion? Kurt?
I'll second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Nay. Anyone abstaining? Okay, that motion carries. Any other comments? Okay. Seeing none, we can move into student and special guest presentations. Matt, do you have anything for us tonight?
Sure. Good friend of mine, a Merrill hockey player, Paul Leader, was named to the All-State hockey team, so I'd like to congratulate him for that. Also, spring sports have all started, and the musical Guys and Dolls is showing at the auditorium April 3rd, 4th, and 5th, which is put on by the high school.
Okay, great. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Then I think we're ready for presentation on power standards. Don?
I think we'll just start next to you, Carrie, if that's okay. If in your packet you have two handouts, one on power standards and one on common formative assessments, and that's what we're going to be referencing. We have about 2 hours of information in these 2 PowerPoints. It's important for us to internalize that, but we're going to get the power presentation here in about 15 minutes.
Thank you.
On this issue. I also want to pass out one of these because that's kind of the outline that we're going to follow. What I'm going to talk about here with a group of people from the district in a very short period of time is an additional strategy that we're working on in the district to improve our capacity for student performance. Some of you have heard me mention Rick Dufour in the past. Rick Dufour is a 3-time National Superintendent of the Year. And I'm also going to talk about Tom Collins, who wrote the book Good to Great. It's a national bestseller right now. And in that, he outlines a number of things, but one of the things he outlines is that good is the enemy of great. We're a good school district. There are good businesses. But we have to do extra things. You have to do a little bit more as a Blue Jay to be great. Okay? And what Rick Dufour did was he did the extra things to get their district to go from good to great. And I'll define what that means. In good to great for Lincolnshire, Illinois, they improved student proficiency by 40% via the processes I'm going to talk to you about here in the next 15 minutes. He asked some key critical questions. What do we want students to know? It's relatively simple. What do we want students to know? How will we know if they know that? And most importantly, what are we going to do if they don't? And what we're going to talk about here is the concept of power standards and common formative assessments. When all the people in recent years, all the educators and the college professors came together, and let's just imagine you were the social studies team that was developing the standards for the state of Wisconsin with all your vast backgrounds, and everybody kept adding to the material. By the time we got done, we had really, really quality material and lots of it. All right? They were very, very well-intended people. They recently calculated out all the standards that we have in the state, and they've taken a look at what would it take the average student to learn all that. They'd be nearly 30 years old. Okay? It's out of necessity by a handful of the school districts in the state who have really been wrestling with this that are saying, Uncle, we need to do something differently than what we're doing. And we're finding the same thing here. We've been working with this in different pieces, letting people chew on it, try some different things, and getting to the point where we are for about 14 months. Man, Jeff Hetfeld sought me out a while ago this winter, and he said, this is the best thing I've seen in the standards movement. This is something teachers are really going to get behind. And what we're going to do with you here is get you to understand the essence of that, give you some real examples of it, and show you what our targets are in the district with it. Okay? What I'm going to do is, right now, turn this over to Tom Hahn and Darren Catlin, who joined me in a presentation that we did for the state of Wisconsin on this that was received very well. And they're going to give you a real example right in the middle school. All right, well, what does this look like then? Okay? So they're going to give you an executive summary. What they're handing you right now is an executive summary of the PowerPoint that I sent you in the board packet. This is the 7-minute version. Okay? No, I gave them only yours. Okay.
Mr. Crone, right behind your head is a light switch.
Thank you, Jeff.
foot on this.
Yeah, put
Do
your
one
foot.
over here.
There we go. Whoops, I'm in the dark. You know, one of the things we look at is, why do we assess? Is it merely to validate that we have covered something, that we have taught something in the classroom, or is it much more? And I think what we're looking at is, we hear a lot about testing today. Who determines what topics should be tested? Who determines how the individual student shows mastery? Is it the same here in Merrill as it is in the rest of the state, as it is in the rest of the country? And it leads us to a big quandary and questions that keep coming up again and again and again. As students today, if you look at that first sentence, students today across the nation may be over-tested, but they are under-assessed. And one of the things we looked at and asked ourselves, is that true? With over 500 state standards to teach, most teachers look at that as an insurmountable task. And what we have been fortunate to be able to do here in Merrill, and as we have around the state, is to start looking at power standards, where we take a look at our entire curriculum and focus on 4 or 5 main topics, the big ideas that run all the way through our curriculum, and focus on those going in depth, and through that covering many of the other standards as well. And we've been very fortunate to be able to do that. Common formative assessments is what is allowing us that chance. What we find out is that assessments can be assessments of learning, and if you think of a spelling test, you know, we give you a list of words, you work to learn those words and to memorize them, and then you're tested to see, can you spell those words? That would be an assessment of learning. But there's another type of assessment, an assessment for learning. And in an assessment for learning, we're going beyond, do you know exactly what the material is, to more of, can you apply it, and how does it impact you, and how can you learn from that as a student, and how can I learn from that as a teacher? And what we've found out is that basically these common formative assessments, or assessments for learning, they're assessments that can be used to help determine at what level or degree of mastery a student is on a particular topic at a specific time in the year. It's also used to assist a teacher in determining what works and what doesn't work, and how I can better meet the needs of my students and meet the needs of the curriculum goals that have been set out for me through the district. And I think that's one of the awesome things. What we have done, and this is very specific, at 7th grade in science, the teachers got together and we reviewed the standards for the state of Wisconsin. We took a look at our local curriculum maps, and we found 4 major threads that ran all the way through everything. And we adopted those, or a version of those, as our power standards. The next thing we did is we took those 4 power standards and we asked ourselves, how can we assess those? And doing it in a big picture type of way. It was neat for me to get together with the rest of my colleagues and find out that consensus can be reached. And sometimes that's a hard thing, but consensus can be reached. We looked at how students learn and how students are assessed, and decided, as a 7th grade science staff, we wanted to use a variety of assessment tools to reach all the different types of learners and how they take tests. And so our first power standard here, how do we conducting investigations, collecting data, drawing conclusions, developing new questions based on those, very critical. It's the scientific method that we're asking students to know and be able to actually use. And so for our assessment, we actually have them design and conduct an investigation, using everything they've collected, design another experiment, and then carry it out. And if they can do that, they show us they really know how to do it. Once we're done, we get together as a faculty, we sit down and we look at those results and we say, how come your students did so well here? What did you do? And as a teacher, I can then look at myself and say, you know what? That's a good idea. I need to put that into use in my own repertoire. I need to change my teaching to better meet the needs of my students. As you can see, our second one is dealing with life, because we teach life science, describe classification and progression of life from a single cell to the entire organism. For this one, we decided to go with a portfolio concept where we collected evidence of the students' abilities throughout an entire unit of work that covered probably a span of 6 to 8 weeks. And at the end of that, we can sit down and look at everything and say, yes, this student knows it, especially when they can sit down and show me as a teacher and tell me everything that they've learned. It's an awesome experience for them and for us as well. Another strand that runs through, of course, is the genetics, DNA, human characteristics, very appropriate to this age level, because they're starting to question those type of things. And here we actually incorporated a WebQuest format, integrating technology into our curriculum, where we're asking students to actually go online and complete a variety of materials and collaboratively work together to arrive at an answer. And one of the neatest things that happened through this whole scenario was that students started to debate with each other. They started really to question each other and gather their own opinion. And it was really nice to see that, you know, we can disagree with each other, and that's okay. Because not everybody does agree all the time on this type of thing. And finally, one that we're hoping to do yet this spring, we do a lot of study of the environment, and we're trying to make it localized. We're getting pictures of the area out there where Walmart is from before anything existed there and now. We're going out and getting pictures from school forest, areas that were logged 50 years ago and areas that were logged 2 or 3 years ago, and talking about how man-made and natural changes have impacted the environment. And let them work through that whole process and tell us about it. Getting all of that information back, I can honestly say my students either know or don't know this material. It gives me a chance to go back and say, we need to beef this section up. I need to meet with that student individually. And more than anything, I then as a teacher get to go back and talk to my fellow colleagues and say, what did you do that I'm not doing, or vice versa? An awesome experience. Math, you'll see, has a little different role in this, but one that I wish I could do because it's really awesome.
Thanks, Tom. We also have 4 power standards in math for the 7th grade. And as you can see, we take a large part of our time when we talk about fractions and integers, and we try to include all the things, geometry, and these are the things that we focus on all year long, okay, as our power standards. From the power standards, the 7th grade last year, at the end of the year, we came up with a 7th grade math sequence. And what we did is, we said to ourselves, how do we want to teach from the materials that we have? And we went through our book and we said, this should go with this should go with this should go with this. And we basically, we don't follow the format of our textbook. We went through and we said, this sequence, this part should really go with this chapter. And as you can see in our Unit 1, we do have Lesson 1.1, which is Chapter 1, Section 1. But also in there, we threw in something from Chapter 7 on perimeter and from Chapter 10 on squares and square roots. And our whole math sequence is like this. It just doesn't follow sequentially through the book, because we sat down and we said, this is what's best for our kids. What this allows us to do, it allows the 7th grade teachers to teach consistently. And we're on a more consistent basis throughout the year. We're all relatively at the same place at the same time throughout the year. And what that does is it allows us to have a common assessment. This is what our common assessment looks like. You'll have to forgive some of the formatting problems there, that it wouldn't let me transfer it to a PowerPoint. So, but this is actually the first page of our common assessment that we gave after 12 weeks. Because we have our sequence after 12 weeks, after 24 weeks, and at the end of the year, every teacher is going to give this test to their students. So we actually made up our own test. and we give this to our students so we can all do what Tom's going to do and get together and say, where did your kids do well? What did you do that your kids did so well? Where did your kids do not so well?
This
Okay.
is critical, what they're both saying. Tom Hahn said the same thing. That level of conversation, we're going to get to that here in just a minute too, that's really powerful. When Tom said, what can I learn from this as a teacher? Okay?
Right. This is not working. Okay. For formative assessment to be productive, students need to be trained in self-assessment so they can understand the main purposes of their learning and thereby grasp what they need to do to achieve. Okay, they need to understand that. Self-assessment, immediate feedback. Okay, the students need to get immediate feedback, which now, with our high-stakes testing that we do with the WKCE, we're planning on getting our test results when back. They took the test in October, and we think we're going to get the results back in May. We hope. But they never even get to see the test back again. With our common assessments, that's not the case. This is what the students actually take part in the collection of the data. They actually get their test back after their test has been corrected, and we go through this, and we actually do a frequency table, which is actually, again, reteaching, because that's something that we cover. They actually do a frequency table and figure out which problems they got wrong. And then in the right column, it says, how many did I get right? And if they have any zeros, then we discuss, what does that mean? If you have zeros there. And the kids all tell you, well, I didn't do so well there. Okay? So they're actually taking a part in the collection of the data. They actually get to see how the data is collected. They actually get to see their test and how they did and what they got wrong and what they got right. This next slide, these are all tables that I made up off of Microsoft Excel. I put these all together. This is for the teachers, and this is where we compile all our data, and then we're going to collect and put all this information together. It's very important that the teachers get to reflect upon this as much as the students. This is a test that is not graded. This test score does not go in the grade book. And all the kids know that. They know that before they take the test. And I tell them, this test is for you and it's for me. And that was conveyed to them before they took the test. So they knew that information, and they knew that the score was not going to go in the grade book because it was not an assessment of learning. It was an assessment for learning. Now the next slide is probably the most important slide in the whole presentation. It truly is. And as you look at that, you're all going, well, it's blank. Well, there's a reason for that. The reason for that is because this slide means absolutely nothing to anyone in this room but me. And as I bring it up here, you're going to see the information that's supposed to be on there for you. Because what it actually is this is the data from the first 12-week assessment. This is the data of my actual students for the first 12 weeks of the year. And if you go all the way over to that right-hand column, you can see the percent correct that my students scored on problem solving, order of operations, variables and expressions, powers and exponents, every topic that we covered from units 1 to 3 the first 12 weeks of the year. Now, you might say, well, look at this. In the second group there, you look at the very bottom and it says scientific notation. You run that all the way across. 45.5%. That's how my students scored in scientific notation.
Here, stay here for a second. Let's go back to the first two questions. What do we want them to know? They've defined it here. They've said to you, these are our targets. Okay? Let's check how they're doing. How are they doing? All right? Now he's going to get into what the
reason why, and you're looking at this, and you can conclude two things. First of all, my students obviously didn't score well, or two, I didn't teach it very well. Okay? There's two things that you can conclude from looking at that score, but you don't know what that score is. You don't know the numbers that went into that 45.5%. I know. For example, did you know that 1/4 of the data that went into that score, those students weren't taught scientific notation? Because they are in my pre-algebra class, in my advanced level class, And we had not reached that topic yet. So I know that Alex, he didn't have scientific notation. So of course he's not going to score well. And if I can break that apart, and if I pull those pre-algebra kids out of that score, it jumps up into the mid to upper 60s. So I know what that data is about. We don't get that with the WKCE test or the high stakes testing. We don't get the opportunity to actually look at the numbers. When we put together our test as a 7th grade math team, we decided we want this to be a skills-oriented test. And if, as you saw the copy, and you can go back and look at it if you want to, it's basic skills, one skill at a time. And this is a big difference between the WKCE test, a big difference. If you go through the math portion of that test, and the first year that we took the test and we got our scores back and they were so bad, we were charged to go through the test and look at it and say, let's analyze this, let's break this down and see what the problem is. We took a problem, or we look and we didn't score well in measurement that year. So we looked at the problems that they had targeted as measurement. There were 5 different objectives in one question, and we couldn't find any of them that had to do with measurement. They had to add, they had to multiply, they had to apply a formula, they had to do 5 different things for one problem to get one answer that this testing group said had to do with measurement. And we had a room full of math teachers, and we couldn't find anything to do with measurement in the whole problem.
Here, can you hit on 2 things about how this transcends into your math meetings at the middle school, and then how you've taken the staff development that we did last summer into, all right, so now we know how they're doing, what are we going to do to make it better?
And it's exactly what Tom touched on earlier, as we get together, and I know we're running past our 7 minutes, aren't we? We get together and we discuss just what Tom says. We look at this and we say, where did our students do well? And if you look at the top problem solving, 98.5%. Our kids can problem solve if you give them proper problems that are appropriate for their level. And that doesn't happen on that test. I can guarantee you, I've seen the problems on that test. They're giving us levels 18, 19, or 20 that are beyond the level of what our kids can do. And they're giving them multitask problems where they can't assess what did they do wrong. Did they get this wrong because they couldn't add or because they couldn't apply a formula? Okay? Our test doesn't do that. Our test gives them specific skills, each one of those skills that we can measure. And we go back as a group, we look at that, we say, what are we doing well? What do we need to work on as a team, as a unit, as a grade level? Okay? And how does this, the most important thing from this is how it benefits the students. And it benefits the students because every day in my class we do math review. We put 5 problems on the board and we review those. And they're just problems from throughout the year from last year. After we finished the test and they collected all this data, the next week I put the 5 new problems on the board, the math review problems, and I just looked at the class and I said, why do you think I chose these problems? And I'll bet I had a half a dozen kids that raised their hand and they said, because those are the ones that we didn't do well on the test. And that was exactly right. I took every one of those low areas up there and we practiced scientific notation.
This is key. So the process is informing him to do his work differently with the students.
We practiced dividing decimals. All the areas up there that were the lowest, we did those 3 weeks in a row. Okay? And we're hoping, I'm hoping, that when we get a common assessment at the end of the year that shows comprehensive over the whole year, I'm hoping that I can show you that those scores went up. Because I found where they were deficient, and I was able to address those needs immediately. Unlike the WKCE, where you get the results months later, and the teacher doesn't have time to go back and remediate. Where this is immediate feedback for them and for me. Let's move on here.
We should probably wrap this section up then.
Just a couple cautions. Sharing data from individual classrooms is a sensitive issue that needs to be addressed by individual groups. It's a very touchy issue for me to share my scores with another 7th grade math teacher, with another 7th grade math teacher. Okay? We have to be careful because we have different comfort levels in sharing for different reasons. Maybe this I've been teaching math quite a few years. Maybe this is a first-year math teacher, or it's the first year they've taught math. They may not feel comfortable sharing their scores. Teachers may fear that this data could be used as means of teacher evaluation. Don's assured us that this isn't going to happen as long as he has some type of control over us.
And the issue there is this, you know, if we want to build a system where we can find out throughout the year, how are we doing? We don't want to get to the end of the year, move on to the next grade, and have the teacher say, well, we all don't know these things, all right? And what we want to do is set the targets, find out throughout the year, are they getting that? Have that inform our practice. And if we start shooting people because they aren't there, we aren't going to get anywhere. So we have to build a culture, you know, build the high expectations and then build a culture of high support.
Yeah, a climate of trust among educators needs to be nurtured and built over time. With this trust, educators can grow and share and be able to share these ideas and help each other. Okay? And I think you're going to...
We'll wrap up here.
Go ahead.
A brief wrap up. Tom's going to give you...
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ken's going to just say something and I'm going to wrap it up.
Can I just want to pass out, this is a 45-minute presentation that we gave to you in about 15 minutes, but I do have the full PowerPoint presentation for the board members here, and I will...
Theirs is a little bit different than the one I gave you, but this is very, very important for the board to internalize, and I'll touch on that in just a minute.
While Darren's doing that, I just want to share with you a perspective at a building level. With this district initiative, the middle school has been spending their half days working in the content areas. Tom Hahn represents our science, Darren represents our math, we have a social studies and a language arts coordinator also. All of them on our half days have been working with identifying the power standards and the common assessments. What have the power standards done for us? It's distilled the curriculum. It's the essential elements of what the teachers need to teach and what the kids need to know. Can you imagine a new teacher walking into the building? Here's your power standards. This is what you absolutely have to get across. Much easier job for that teacher. Also, we can see what's being done at the grade levels, above us and below us, so there's more discussion and more continuity. What do the common assessments do for us? You've heard them talk about immediate feedback. We don't have to wait for months or maybe a whole school year to get our test results back. They can immediately change their instruction to meet the needs of their students. And for me, the most important thing of our common assessments that we've done so far is the non-threatening, non-judgmental discussions that these teachers have with each other. Because like they said, Darren can talk to another math teacher and say, why did your kids do so well on that scientific notation? What did you do? Well, I did this and this. I'm going to try that. Nothing coming from administration, you know, slapping their hand why their kids didn't do well in that area. It's the discussion that takes place between them that they go back in the classroom, adjust their teaching, and therefore have kids be more successful. Very powerful.
Okay, I'm just going to wrap up with a few other important things that I really want all of us to grasp. DeForest's 3 questions. What is it that's most important that they know? We have all of our curriculum laid out on our curriculum maps. We now have defined pre-K-12. Here's our power standards document. We've had the conversations, scaffolding these across the grade levels. So for example, the exit level expectations for 4th grade match the entry level expectations for 5th grade, and both sets of teachers know that, okay? We've done the corresponding work, so we've matched this between the power standards work and the targets on our standards-based report card, okay? So we've defined what's most important that we want students to know and be able to do as they pass from grade to grade. His first question. This is the system that I want to do, all right? I want to do a marriage between the power standards, the development of common formative assessments. You're seeing a couple of examples, but the vision is to have, as DeFore did, is to establish these assessments 3 to 4 times a year in every core content area, so we know exactly where our kids are at all the time. So when they're saying, I'm adjusting my instruction Tuesday as a result of what I learned and we discussed on Monday. That's what we want to be doing in our buildings, okay? And then further, we're going to do a marriage between that concept of power standards and common formative assessments and our MSI days. Because I talked to some teachers and they say, well, we're kind of doing that now. Well, that's kind of like saying I kind of spend my money wisely and I kind of save my money wisely too. Well, what is that? The difference is, are we giving our teachers the opportunity to sit down and converse about how our kids are doing? How are your students doing? Why did your students score average 96% and mine average 72%? What are you doing in there that caused that to happen? So that's the target that I want to shoot for, is at some point next year we have one common assessment developed in each grade level in a content area tied to these power standards, and we do a marriage between one of our half days, and that's so our teachers can actually sit down. They gave the assessment on a Friday, and they sit down, they have the immediate results Tuesday on the half day, and they're sitting down there talking, and they're asking these questions. How do kids do? Why is that? What are we going to do about that? Okay? That's where we want to drive the specific conversations in the district. A couple last key points here. So you got 4 students in the district. You got little Lynn Zentner and you got little Ron Boehm. They're just loving school. They're both first chair in the flute and the trumpet and the band, and they're getting good grades. Lynn's a cheerleader, Ron's a wrestler. Everything is just wonderful. And then you got little Frankie Harrington and Donnie Viegel, okay? And we love school too, but for all kinds of different reasons. Because this school is a big social institution that was designed for our fun, okay? And we've got all this curriculum, and not only all this curriculum in social studies, but in math and science and on, okay? And through the eyes of the student, this becomes daunting, okay? And little Frank and Don, we love school, we start falling behind. Does that go on in the district? Okay, we start shutting down, and we start covering more, and we start falling further behind. Okay, when we decide to go to intervene with students, what do we intervene about? This much curriculum? We intervene about what they really need to know and be able to do to get to the next grade. Then I won't shut down, and I'll be right with you, Ron. Okay? You've got to get that. One of the last points here, Japanese lesson study. One of the most powerful things I saw when I was in Japan in education was around what they teach, the power standards, and how they go about doing that. Their culture is heavy conversations comparable to what Darren is saying. What is our data showing? How are we doing? What are all the different ways we can teach this? And watch in the next 5 years how this conversation of Japanese lesson study moves across the country, because that's what we want to have our folks do. Okay?
And the last point, Don? We need to wrap it up.
My last point is influencing state direction. Just take a look at this piece right here. A group of us got together and drafted this, and we shared this with Libby Burmaster and Jack Keene. And to make a long story short, we want to influence the state direction as well. Now you're going to start to hear Libby Burmaster talk about power standards and priority standards, because when the new SCA is unveiled in the state of Wisconsin, we aren't going to have this much standards to account for. They're going to develop power standards and priority standards in the content areas tested. So we were able to influence that direction in the state of Wisconsin. The WKCE as we know it is going to change based on this conversation. Jack Keene has all of our power standards. He has these PowerPoints, and they're in the process right now of crafting the power standards for the state of Wisconsin based on this information. And the new WKCE is going to shift from being the assessment that it is right now to being a criterion reference test that'll come back on a more timely basis that's really going to assist what we're doing. So we're lock in step with where the state is going here. So that's That's the essence, that's the big picture, that's our target, and then over the years as we can develop this, we will have all of those assessments employed, and those conversations will be driving our improvement processes as one of the vehicles. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Don. I could see the enthusiasm with Tom and Darren and yourself, and appreciate all of the work that you did here. And I will ask board members if they have questions to contact Don in the interest of time so that we can move on, if that's okay. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming. Next item on the agenda is Linda. Music lesson.
We'll try to do it in 10 minutes, but...
Our 10 minutes seem to be a little fuzzy here.
My take is 12. I was elected to do this because I talk the fastest. Our goal tonight is to help you understand music curriculum delivery and instrumental music. We believe that you need this information to help you make educated decisions, and so that you might be able to answer questions should a community member ask you. I think the Board of Education, first of all, has to make an assumption here, not only about me and my colleagues, but all the teachers in our district, and that is that this district has hired competent teachers, and that we understand how curriculum is delivered in our own subject areas. And you have to trust that our training and our years of experience, we know what it takes to teach instrumental music. That's what we study, that's what we know. I was just curious, how many of you have ever taught instrumental music in a public school? How many of you have picked up the curriculum guide on instrumental music and even breezed through it? A couple people? Okay. And this is not meant to be insulting or offensive in any way, so please don't take it that way, but I have a problem with some of the comments that have been made recently that tell us how our department should operate, what curriculum we should offer, and how it should be delivered when really you're not understanding it. And so our goal tonight is to try to help you understand that a little bit. Now, I heard a number of you say over the years that, well, I was in the band in high school, or I was in the band in junior high school, and being in the band and teaching it are two very different things. Louise, I took chemistry in high school and I took chemistry in college, but I'm guessing you would not have wanted me to come over to the high school and tell you how to teach it. Would that be a pretty fair assumption?
Oh, I would have listened.
Oh, I'm telling you, I do not have a clue what it took to do your job. I mean, I know you have bodies and you teach them. Okay, that's it. Carrie, I've had haircuts for like 48 years, you know, but I would not presume to come down and tell you how to do it. But at break, I could use one. And Mr. Peterson, I've had insurance my whole adult life, but I have no clue. Yeah, it is good, but I have no clue what you need to do to make your business operate, and I wouldn't presume to tell you. And I guess what we do know is how to teach instrumental music. And I have one thing to say tonight that if you would remember this, I don't care if you remember the rest, and that's this, and I even typed it in bold. Okay? So it says this. Lessons are the most important thing we do. Lessons are the most important thing we do. We give lessons in instrumental music for the same reasons that every other school gives lessons in instrumental music. It's the foundation for everything we do. We're not talking about the half-hour lesson or the hour lesson you get if you go to, like, the Wausau Conservatory. We're not talking that kind of instruction. We're talking at the high school, 10 minutes a week, maybe 12 if they get their instrument together quickly. At the middle school, it's much, much less, and most of our middle school kids are grouped in lessons. We have, in instrumental music, two very different and very separate curriculums, and two very different and separate ways of delivering them. We have the large group curriculum, where we take the skills that the students learn in lessons and apply them to the group. And a lot of those concepts might be style, tempo, dynamics. We can talk about music history, we can talk about music theory, and a lot of that we can assess on a written test if we need to. But the performance skills are completely dependent on the individual skills. And individual skills are not, and they cannot be, addressed during rehearsal. The curriculum for the instrument itself is delivered in lessons. In lessons, and I just brought our beginning band book. This is what all our beginners get. And here's two of them. They look very much alike, I understand, because they come from the same publisher. The only thing that is alike in this bassoon book and trumpet book is the cover. Once you open the book, there are two very different curriculums inside. And we have one for each instrument. And of course, the drum book looks completely different because they are completely different. So we have a textbook. Now, our beginners, and we're using beginners because it's the easiest to understand here, is they start right here, page 1, book 1. Oh, sorry, page 6. We started right on page 6. It makes them feel real good. Page 6. The student works until they master this page. For some students, that takes 2 days. For other students, it might take 2 months. They cannot go on to this page until they've mastered this page. Ever. Okay? If they can't do this, they will never, ever in their lives be able to do this page. right? And again, kids take different times to do that. And not only do we have the intellectual differences in playing an instrument, but we deal with a lot of physical differences. In music, you have coordination and motor skills. You have how their lips are, what their tongue is doing, their mouth, their teeth. Do they wear braces? What kind of lung capacity do they have? What's their physical fitness level? What's the size of their hands, the lengths of their fingers, the lengths of their arms? Do they have an innate rhythmic ability? And then there's the cognitive skills, like do they read well, those kinds of things. And some students, like I said, may need a month to master something someone else masters in a day. And there's only one way for us to monitor progress and assess student performance in instrumental music. You have to watch them and you have to listen to them play individually. Musical performance cannot be assessed with a written test or a term paper or doing a project. Lessons are, and you heard about assessment tonight. It's nice, and this is not meant insulting to the other curriculums, but it's nice that the other curriculums are finally doing what instrumental music has been doing for years, which is determining mastery by watching the person sit down and do what they need to do. About 90% of the lessons I have at the middle school are group lessons, and you can introduce concepts in a group, but you cannot assess a student in a group. You still have to have each person play individually. So I could have 2 kids sitting on each side of me, or 4 kids, or 8. Wouldn't matter. I still have to go down the line and hear them all play it one at a time. Because even in a group of 2, someone can cover up what someone else is doing, and even though they're right next to me, you will not hear or see everything they're doing, even to the musically trained eye or ear. And when more than one performer is playing at a time, you can't assess them. And we're just going to show you that. We're going to do a little quick demonstration. And we're going to play one of the hottest beginning band tunes that was ever written, and we're going to ask you to evaluate our group. And this is a very, very tiny room in terms of instrumental music. And it's going to be loud. You might want to move here. This is the 3rd page in the book where some kids will get to in maybe 2 weeks. I've got some students that can't do it yet.
Don't take the fun out of it.
Now, we'd like you to watch and listen to us. We're going to do a tune you know very, very well. And we worked really hard to memorize this. So see if you can pick out what we're doing right and wrong. Say it was very good. In a group of 5, we sounded pretty good. So what? We give this group an A, right? Not quite. We're going to go down the line and play exactly what we just played, and you're going to find out there was only one student in this group of 5 that did it correct. And I'll go first since I'm on the end. This is a typical beginner problem. Here's what I sounded like by myself. I think you get really nervous. That's all the farther I'm going to go, but I have 3 very basic problems, like my teeth are closed, but you can't play trumpet, and I have a cork missing, so every time I play a note, it doesn't come out. You don't hear that in a group.
But I was not using my tongue at all. I was only doing it with little spurts of air.
And you need empty spit though, so.
Now, you can tell that that's wrong right away. And here's the problem. Same problem I had with a student this afternoon in middle school. This valve is in backwards.
He did what he was supposed to. He oiled his valve before class, got it in wrong.
Yeah. That happens a lot in beginning band.
Sometimes we make it hell.
Well, not perfect. I'm known in beginning band circles as too good to be true.
Mr. Schramm got an A. Mr. Callio.
I can't do it. Well, because I don't know how to play the music, I have to follow Jeff's fingerings. So I just watch his valves and then I do what he does.
That's how you were just
That happens a lot. And so you have to teach the reading separately.
Now, I want you to imagine, this is only a group of 5. And I want you to imagine 140 students outside, spread about 50 yards apart, moving around, playing over 30 different instruments, and playing different parts, playing much more complex music, and you're up on a platform 20 yards away. Now, I'm going to ask you to assess those individual students. Can it be done? Is there any way it can be done? No, it can't be. And 90% of what we do on the marching band field, by the way, is all the visual aspect. There's very little musical stuff that goes on out there. That's done inside and in lessons. And Luis, a comment that you made at the last meeting was that you would have loved to give chemistry lessons. Do you remember saying that? Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, if you'd have gone to Lanny Tabaldo and asked him to give you a schedule like ours, I know what he would have said, because another teacher did it. He said, you let me know when you want to do it, and I'll have that schedule for you tomorrow. Here's what your schedule would look like. Okay? You'd have about 140 students at one time in your classroom. 20 of those would be studying physics, 20 might be studying chemistry, 20 might be studying biology, might be another 20 studying earth science. Might have another 20 studying astronomy. You have the 20 art science link kids. Then you'll have this group of 20 dance students that have nothing to do with what you teach. And then you have another 20 students studying about 6 different math courses at the same time in the same classroom each day. But then we would allow you to develop a schedule fitting those students in for 10 to 12 minutes once a week for their science lesson. Now, you can't get them in during the school day. So you'll have to use your prep hour, your lunch period, your before and after school time every day, all year long, the rest of your life. Now, would that work to teach science? In that format, with 140 kids all studying something different. Could you make that work for yourself? I don't think so. Now, I can't imagine any class with 140, or could it work with 70? All doing something different. Do you think that would work for you?
I would not try it in a science classroom.
That's right. And you know what? I wouldn't want to do, we can't operate our classes like she did. And you know how the grass is always greener on the other side, that somebody looks at what you're doing, oh, that's such a nice day, you just give those individual lessons all day, you don't really do anything. And then I look at an academic classroom and I say, you mean you've only got 24 kids at a time? And they all have the same textbook, they're studying the same concept? What a breeze. Now, we know that's not true, right? But instrumental music can't operate that way. It would be no program if I had 24 clarinets, all of about the same ability, in one classroom. We could use the same textbook, but you'd never have a band, you'd never be able to do the things we do. It just won't work. Different departments require different things. It just won't work. So asking students to perform as an ensemble without lesson instruction is like asking a group of carpenters to build a house, but you don't teach them how to use the tools. And I would also like to say that, just in closing, that for the sake of argument, I'm going to assume that we're all intelligent people, including the band directors. If it was possible for us to do our jobs well in 8 hours a day, and have a lunch every day, and have a planning period every day, and have our before and after school time to do other work, we could go home at 4 o'clock, we wouldn't be here nights, weekends, and summers, don't you think we'd do that? I mean, we all have other interests in our lives too. But in order to get the kids the instruction they need, they all have to have lesson time, and we do whatever you have to do to get that lesson time. We could shrink it up and say, yeah, we'll take 20 kids at a time for a lesson, but we know that wouldn't work. It's why we do what we do, because it's the only way we can do what we do. And then, in closing, I would like to invite any one of you to join us sometime. Because to my knowledge, other than Ron and an occasional parent-teacher conference with some of you over the years, I've never seen anybody in our classrooms. And I think I speak for all 5 of us that say that you are more than welcome to come and spend a day with us anytime.
Thank you for not asking us to play. Very good.
Oh, by the way, I just wanted to hand out one thing. This is just the American School Band Directors Association workload for band directors. This is national, and I'm sorry I didn't make enough. So. Yeah, and it just tells a typical band director's load that they recommend nationally. It just lists all different schools. So just something for you to look at that maybe you haven't seen before.
Thank you very much, Linda. Okay, if everybody's ready, we will move on to Board President Communication. Did everyone get a letter from Lynn Stephen? I'm sorry, Lisa.
Lisa Stelton-Pole.
Stelton-Pole. Lisa Stelton-Pole.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I did.
You did not?
I usually don't.
And then I did receive a letter from Gloria Harmonic to the board. Yes, I did that. Family Literacy Night at
I've got it.
He's got it. Family Literacy Night at Washington School last March 13th, Thursday, a couple weeks ago. I was able to go and it was really fun. Karen Helt did a nice job, and all the teachers that put things on for parents, trying to get them more acclimated into reading and different things. And I got to use Accelerated Reader and take a reading test, but I got one wrong. So it isn't as easy as it looks. But thank you to Karen and everyone. They did a great job. With that, a reminder that we have a special executive meeting April 2nd, Wednesday night at 6:30 to close session to review superintendent candidates. And then a reminder for everyone that should have gotten their interview team literature that we will be doing interview teams April 8th and April 9th. Louise and I were going to go to a Stevens Point small school conference thing that was talking about small schools up north, but they didn't have enough interest, so they canceled it. They only had three people, I guess, that were interested in coming, and it's dealing with the issues of how the WASB handles the northern half of the state, and so I guess they just didn't get a big response. Bless you. A thank you to Denise Schultz and Jeannie Nino from Kate, first graders. They let me read to them, and the kids were really fun. I hope everybody's had a chance to go read, because it really was fun. And, I was amazed. They were reading a piece on the board about what they were going to do for that next hour, and wow, it's just amazing what they're doing in first grade. I went to the Joint Finance Committee meeting in Rhinelander on Monday, as did Mr. Harrington and Terry Van Straten and Kathy Orteman from our district. And if you think the board meetings are tough, boy, you ought to go to a Joint Finance Committee meeting. There are people up and down all the time. They're talking to each other. They're back and forth, and then they have people speaking to them constantly. So I don't know, at any given time, you're maybe only speaking to 3 or 4 people that are sitting at the table. And it
might be listening.
Yeah, I mean, and then they have boxes of papers, because everybody brings handouts, and they just have this huge box. They put all the papers in, and I guess you would hope that they pass them out and read them, but the system certainly seemed a little chaotic to me. I'm just going to pass out what I had spoken about at the meeting, and that was just a support of some mandate relief. One of the sheets is what WASB is supporting in the School Administrators Alliance, looking for more local control and waivers of how we get waivers on our mandates, and looking to give more local control to the school district and the community. Certainly flexibility in the SAGE program, and I talked a little bit about the 180-day seat time requirement versus the instructional time, and how it would be more flexible if we could just have the minutes and not the day requirement. And then Senate Bill 15 that was attached, I believe may have passed the Senate, and might be in the legislature right now, but it deals in the future with creating a joint survey committee on state mandates, and it will force anyone who wants to create a new mandate to bring it to that committee, and that committee will have to have proof of funding before it can go into operation. So let's hope that passes.
How many years late is that?
I think we were all invited to attend the great speaker, Harriet Turk, on April 11th. She'll be speaking at the high school at 8:15 and 10:05, and at the middle school at 12:45. I think everybody received that letter. This was kind of interesting. I had gotten it. It's all of your board paper on the computer, something called Board Docs. And I'm wondering if maybe the Finance Committee could look into how much, or the potential of it would be actually feasible to do some of this, get rid of some of the paper and do it on the computer. So maybe we can shift that over there. John Kaufman has been emailing, I don't know if people have seen it, it kind of maps history notes 30 years ago, 25 years ago. I don't know if everybody's gotten it, but I wanted to thank John and Sharon for doing that. It really was kind of fun and interesting, and I know you gave up I know it wasn't, it was done on your own personal time, so I do appreciate that. It was kind of fun. And did everybody get a copy of the new WASB resolution book, or? Okay, so everybody's covered there? Okay, that is it for me. Anyone else have anything under correspondence? No? Okay. Mr. Harrington.
I'm going to save time. I won't speak on but two things. In front of you tonight there was a letter I received from a former band student supporting the band program. And three pieces, my response to a parent on the Spirit Squad, and a salmon-colored and blue-colored set of documents that support that.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to old business then. Consider student foreign travel. You want to speak first, Gina?
Let me start out first. Several months ago, Gina Noko, and actually before that, Mark Wettig had come to the board to request permission to take extended field trips, and we have a board policy that is followed, and they did follow the board policy in making their request, and the board, prior to all of the incidents of national concern, gave approval to Mark Wettig's group to go to Belize again. And I included an email from him that indicated that at this point there are a number of students that have individually dropped out so that they don't have a large enough number to have a contingent to go, and so they're scrapping that trip entirely. And a couple of months back, Gina Noko and Don Shire came to the board and requested an English department June trip to London, which is a really neat thing. And the board passed a motion saying that yes, you would approve that with a contingency that the parents would allow their children to attend. So that actually falls back on the shoulders of the parents to make that decision. Other school districts around us have taken a little different posture with these kinds of trips, and are simply saying no. Right now we're in the middle of an international dilemma, and each day I call Representative Obie's office because they have from the State Department every day whatever alerts are being posted and what is safe travel and what's not safe travel. And there's kind of a safe harbor relative to our groups going that if the State Department posted a travel warning that the trip would be exonerated in terms of loss of fees on the part of the students. And there's still another little piece with this. And I'll let Gina talk a little bit more about other factors that are going on as well.
More than anything, I just wanted to be here tonight to answer any more questions that you had. I didn't really have anything prepared. I wasn't asked to do that, but we do have 18 students that are still going. We had one student drop. I think they were concerned about world affairs, but I think it was also had to do with some personal reasons. But we have 18 students, 18 passports, and we even got a third chaperone. Fred Teeley will be going with us. I know the board, the concern that had been raised was having a male chaperone, and while you didn't require us to do that, we thought it was a good idea. When we had the 18 sign up, we got an extra chaperone, and he's male. So we are ready to go, and we met with the kids last week. They're excited. I think some of the parents showed up for our student meeting, which did kind of give us some, they're concerned about what's going on in the world. Two parents did show up and express that they're a little bit uneasy. But overall, we're still getting the feeling from the kids and the parents that they want to go. We did also call the company and we said, what can you do for us? Is there anything else, in times of war? And they said they're offering something that they don't normally offer, and that's 14 days before we leave, up until 14 days before we leave. If we're still at war, they will, for $100 a student, give us a voucher to go next summer. So that would be up until 14 days before we leave, but the country has to be at war. One problem with that is that we do have about four seniors that, I don't know if they're going to want to come back from college or come back from wherever they are and go on a high school field trip overseas. I'm sure that maybe if they had paid for it, that they still might want to do that. And the fact that it is another $100, plus they need to purchase new insurance, since the insurance will run out before then. So it might be actually about $200 extra, but when they've already paid about $1,800, it might be definitely worth their extra expense to do that. At this point, both Don Shire, myself, and Fred Teeley feel like we'd like to try it. At least wait it out until that 2-week period beforehand, or 3 or 4 week period beforehand. But of course, we're open to whatever you're going to decide tonight.
Thank you, and I think it's really important that you're staying in touch with the parents, so that's crucial, and it sounds like you've done that in the kids, and I think that's maybe all you can do. Are there any comments or questions for Karen? I don't believe this is on as an action item, so. Gina. Sorry.
Okay.
The board could act on it if there was a desire.
Since it's old business.
I was not here on Monday, and Gina, I downloaded your email today, so I didn't have an opportunity to get back to you, and you had commented about this opportunity for travel a year from now with a $100 additional payment, and it creates a problem for some of the students. And since I downloaded this, I've been thinking about what's a reasonable thing to recommend. If you would ask what my recommendation would be, that's really a tough one. I guess personally, I still believe that it goes back to the parents and their decision to either allow their student to participate or not. And if I had a 16, 17-year-old student, I might be a little queasy about it, but there's all kinds of ways that you have to look at it. So I don't have a specific recommendation other than I think it's the parents' responsibility to make that choice.
Tell me again about the money. If the board were to say that you couldn't go on the trip, how much money would the people involved lose?
We did a couple months ago, I think, contact you and ask you again to bring it up because their kids have not made their large payment yet. At this point, we are 99 days prior to departure. We're working with that schedule, and they would lose about $595. That's pretty significant, and I guess I would prefer, at least giving them the option to go next year, with maybe just waiting it out and seeing. I know that can be uncomfortable. We did, after we got your response back from that meeting, you had asked us, we're going to leave it up to the parents in the State Department, but we want you to let the parents know that. We're not going to make this decision. So we did write the parents a letter explaining a few things about the trip, and then also saying the board met and, they want you to know that it's your decision. And we talked about if they want to pull their individual children, and at that time we did lose one student that then lost $200, but at least it wasn't $600 at that time.
Tom?
Just a question about that option that the company is giving in terms of postponing the trip for next year. I assume that's kind of all or none, that whole group of 18 would have to agree to that, or could some go this year and some go next year if they chose to?
Some could go this year, some could go next year. They don't get a they obviously need to be chaperoned, so they'd need to be in groups of 6 or more. So we've got 18, it could be, 6 this year and then the rest next year or something like that. As long as there's 6 traveling, then a chaperone can go along with them.
So it gives some options to parents that they have some choices.
Jeff?
Okay, yeah, that was part of my question, was 6 is a minimum that you need to go.
Right.
Okay.
Unless, then the charge for the chaperone goes up. But the chaperone goes free with the 6 students.
Chaperone was 3 with 6. Okay. So you're looking at 6 as being your minimum number. Okay. I guess the other question I had was, from the travel agency's standpoint, what is their requirement in order for them to cancel the trip at no loss to the students?
The travel or the EF tours will cancel if there's a warning put out by the State Department to the location that we are going. So it would have to be a travel warning to Great Britain, or I don't know if they've ever issued nobody's going anywhere kind of travel, but it would have to include Great Britain or the locations that we'd be going.
And other than London, where else are you going to be?
We're going to Scotland. We're going around England and then to Scotland.
Lynn?
Had you checked that the vouchers, if you ended up doing vouchers, that the seniors, that they could be transferable to a younger sibling?
They can
Or to another student, to another student.
And I would want to call to double check this, but according to what I'm reading here, it would cost $100 to transfer that. So it would be $100 for the voucher, $100 for the transfer, and possibly $100 for the new insurance.
Additional insurance.
Additional insurance.
Okay.
So it'd be like an extra 100 from what they're probably going to have to pay for the voucher.
Okay.
And I believe that's for the plane ticket cost to transfer the name of the ticket.
Okay. Thank you.
Would you need some official action from us to indicate that we would be agreeable if they wish to postpone the trip till next year?
I think that would be advisable for you to do. Again, I try to do at least every other day contact with Representative Obie's office to find out, and they refer to it as the United Kingdom when they talk about the travel area. But I think that the board probably should consider a motion that would allow a separation of the two possibilities. Either, that a group of 6 or more could go this summer, still with parent permission, and if students decided that they wanted to wait for a year, they could have that as an option as well.
Any other discussion, or would anyone want to make that motion? Carrie?
When were you going again, Judy? What, the dates?
We do not have definite dates yet. They're going to be sending those to us in another 3 weeks or so, but it has to be within 4 days of June 14th. That is our departure date. I'm sorry, June 17th. So within 4 days of June 17th, either way, they leave that flexibility so that they can, I guess, get cheaper flights, that kind of stuff until 3 months beforehand.
Okay.
And it's 10 days, so then that would be through the 27th, and it could be 4 days within that range.
Jeff?
Yes, I'm not sure that we'd have to take any action yet. Or do you feel that there's a reason that we would? I guess I'm inclined to say let's wait a little bit and see how things play out, and we could always, if it looks like for some reason we're going to want to do the voucher thing, we could do that in later in April or even early May.
I think it might just be the flexibility to do that. Not that we would tell them they couldn't go now, but they would have the option to structure it in the other 2 ways if they so did, if it turned out that only 6 wanted to go now and some wanted to go later. But certainly if they all want to go, I mean, I don't think the motion would hamper that.
Then in other words, what you're looking for is a motion that would more or less state that we give authority to our English department and our administration with the backing of the MAPS board on their decisions depending on conditions as they arise. Isn't that?
For a trip this June or next June.
Right.
Or July.
But I mean, that would be pertinent to the conditions that would come about then
That
for
would
the
cover it,
decision
huh?
making then.
Yes, that would cover it.
Could I just say there's one more option, and that is that we can change our destination. So if anything would come up and there was a travel warning to Great Britain, we could go somewhere else, although that is one of the safest places I think. Right now, I don't know where I want to go. So that is a better option.
Okay. Did you want to make a motion since you so eloquently said that, Ron?
Forgot what I said.
Yes.
I'll make an attempt at it. I move that we give authority to our administrative people here with MAPS and the English department, along with backing from the school board of MAPS, to make a decision in regards to the trip to, should we say, the United Kingdom this year, or depending on world conditions, saving it till next year on the voucher system. Is that?
Okay, that sounds all right to me. Frank,
Mhm.
that's good. Do I have a second to that motion? Carrie?
Second that.
Any discussion, Ron?
Well, I don't think there's any safe time because you can remember how many years back that Lockerbie plane went down. But with all the best intentions, and we do want our students to get the best opportunities, sometimes the best information is not good enough, and so we have to go on our good hunches.
Okay. Carrie, do you have anything? I think as a parent, I would want to make that decision for my child too, and I wouldn't want to have any parent lose any portion of their money just because we decided or we thought that it wasn't safe. So I think we should just give them the opportunity and see what happens. Maybe things, God willing, will be all over and done with. So I think we should give them the opportunity to make their decision as it goes along.
Anyone else for discussion? Everyone ready to vote? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, nay? Anyone abstaining? Okay, that motion carries. Thank you, Gina, for continuing to be concerned about this and keeping us informed, and good luck. I hope you're able to go and things work well. Oh, yes, sorry.
Before we leave this topic, for the public, will you explain what happened with the trip to Belize, which was science-based and rainforest, and then also the German trip? No. Spanish students. I thought we had a German one.
That's a year away.
A year away. Okay.
Hopscotched away, so we're not concerned about that. I received an email from Mark Wettig, and I'll simply read it. It said, I had a recent meeting with the families of students scheduled to go to Belize to inform them of the ramifications of canceling our trip after the full balances had been paid due April 1, and to discuss the fears involved with travel. Although I felt the meeting went very positively, enough students or parents have since contacted me about canceling that we no longer have the minimum number needed to go. I therefore have canceled the trip. You may want to inform the board of this with my thanks and regrets. Mark Wettig.
And the money that the students had paid?
It was due on April 1st, so I will check with Mr. Wettig, but I think it has been returned, whatever deposits were made. But I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. And then the Costa Rican trip?
I'm not able to respond to that. I don't know.
Anything else?
I would like that on the agenda. I'd like to know about that trip. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, ma'am.
I know that I have a couple friends that were going to go to Belize, and they did lose, I don't know the exact number, but they did lose something, some deposit. I don't know the exact number.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on that? Seeing nothing then, we can flip over to the back side, and we have approval of minutes. March 12th regular board meeting. They're attached to the packet. I believe everyone was present. I have a motion to approve those minutes. Jeff?
To approve the minutes, the March 12, 2003 regular board meeting as printed.
Do I have a second to that motion? Tom?
Second that motion.
Any corrections, additions, discussion? Seeing none? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, nay? Anyone abstaining? Okay, then we had minutes from the March 6th special ad hoc finance joint meeting with the board. They were separate minutes in the packet, one sheet. I believe Lynn was not present, but I think everyone else was. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes? Louise?
I move approval.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Jeff? Any corrections, additions, discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, nay? Anyone abstaining?
Abstain.
Lynn? Okay. Those minutes are approved. Then we move on to claims and vouchers. Tom?
I would move to approve claims and vouchers dated 3/13/03 to 3/28/03 inclusive.
Thank you. And I assisted Tom, so I will ask for a second to that motion. Someone wish to second? Jeff?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Any other discussion, Tom?
No, we went through them, and I was satisfied with all the explanations that Pat provided. Everything looked in good shape.
Jeff, anything?
I had emailed Pat 2 questions, and she answered those for me as well.
Okay. Anyone else have a question on the vouchers? Okay, seeing none then, we will take a roll call vote to approve the vouchers. Sue, please.
Jeff Peterson.
Here, which isn't enough.